everybody wants to photograph NFL. Yes, everyone wants to photograph, professional hockey. You have to practice.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get good at something because you just sit around and hope that it'll happen.
Mm-hmm. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to The Edit. I am Amanda from Seattle.
And I'm Whitney from Minneapolis.
And today we have such an awesome guest. I have known Jenny for, oh my gosh, over a decade now, thanks to the Seahawks and our connection there. And I am so excited to have her on today to talk about sports photography and photojournalism and talking about her path to photography. So welcome, Jenny.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So tell us about your path to becoming a photographer.
Oh, how much time do you have? Just
I know you're all over the place and I love it.
So I started, taking pictures when I was pretty young. I got my first camera from my grandfather, who had taken a trip to Japan and brought back a Canon camera. And so he wasn't using it anymore. And he's like, here, take this camera and go have fun. And I sure did. So that was many, many years ago. But then kind of, expanded off of that. I attended the University of Washington, where I worked at the student newspaper, The Daily. Had a ton of fun there. And that basically kind of pushed me away from being a doctor.
Oh, I did not know that about you.
Yes. And pushed me firmly into photojournalism. So I got a staff job at the Everett Herald directly after I graduated from the UW. Worked at Everett Herald for 10 years, left there in 2004, and then for 7 years was a photo editor for MSN and Bing. And then I also shot freelance sports for USA Today Sports Images, Associated Press sometimes, and then I was also a photo editor for the Seattle Seahawks. So that was kind of like my gig economy period in there. And then 3 years ago, I was extremely fortunate enough to get my dream job, which is staff photographer at the Seattle Times. And that's where I am now.
I love
Amazing.
it. I know, right? It's so cool. And so, yeah, Jenny and I met through the Seahawks over a decade ago. And we met through our mutual friend / mentor, Rod Marr, who is so good about bringing people together. And he's a people person, and he just surrounds himself with amazing people, amazing talent. And so it was so fun to be able to meet Jenny and just kind of come full circle here with this moment too. So, okay. You've been a photographer, like you mentioned, for USA Today Sports Images and Associated Press, and the photo editor for Bing, MSN, and the Seahawks. So what advice would you give someone? I know, so many things. So what advice would you give someone looking to get into this field of photography?
So my field of photography, especially now, is really specialized. I have a very coveted staff photo position at a major newspaper. Those are very few and far between now. There are, as everybody knows, fewer and fewer newspapers every day. Yeah. So my advice for people wanting to get into my specific field is you have to be really patient. There are not a lot of jobs in my field out there. Like I said, very fortunate to be where I am, and just kind of quite don't know how I got here, which is, I'm just so happy every day to go to work. The other thing is, you will not get rich in my certain field. So if your goal is, to buy a Rolex, like this is not for you.
I love it.
How did you end up getting, I don't think I actually know the story for this one. How did you end up getting this staff position on the Times?
Well, they had an opening, and I applied for it. I've applied for positions at the Times for many years now. Always, when I was in college, applied for all of their internships, never got one. Applied for numerous temp staff jobs and, different openings that they've had over the years, made final interviews a couple times, and of course never gotten it. So
there's that patience.
I've had my share of strikeouts with them in particular, because I grew up in Seattle. It's always been a newspaper that my family has subscribed to. it's always been a place that I've wanted to be, and just had never been given that opportunity before. And for some reason, this 3 years ago, was more like 3.5 years ago, applied and made it. I still don't know how it happened, but just very fortunate enough to be here.
That's so cool.
I love it, because I think so many people, a lot of times when they're starting in photography, maybe they have this dream of where they want to be. And if it doesn't happen within like the first 3 months, 6 months, they just quit and give up. And, I think along the way, as photographers, our dreams can change, or maybe they don't, or maybe we're coming back around to it. And so I think about what you're sharing, and my dream has always been to just create photographs for myself. I want to have like a show in a nice gallery one day. I haven't done that yet, but I was a wedding photographer for 12 years. And so I learned so many skills with that. And now I'm actually more so on that path of accomplishing that dream. And I'm so glad I did something that maybe wasn't my like dream job at the beginning, just to learn so much. And so I think it's just great too that you were able to like say, well, I didn't get it. Let me try again. Let me try again, because it will happen, and you proved yourself through all the work that you've accomplished.
Yeah.
I'm sure that has something to do with it. You're not an 18-year-old out of high school trying to get this job.
Yeah. Well, and especially like all of those experiences that you had leading up to it. I mean, maybe that was it. Maybe it's just to be, where you are now. It's amazing to have learned all those other skills and to have done so many other things too. I always like to think about that part of things. Like maybe it wasn't time yet, but now you had these years to just absorb and gain all of these other pieces of information and pieces of the puzzle. And then here you are now just totally kicking butt, because looking at the pictures on your Instagram and everything you share, it's so cool to see when you post your picture being printed like on the newspaper. It's so cool. Yeah. That's got to be amazing, by the way, to like having grown up, like you said, with a subscription to Seattle Times, whole life. And then now to see your picture printed on there. How amazing.
Yeah, that is definitely, I think, one of the most fulfilling parts. I mean, obviously we all have egos, right? Like we like seeing our names, we like seeing our photos, and having a daily product that comes out, as this tangible thing that you can hold in your hand, that you can send in the mail, right, to your relatives. It's amazing. And Seattle Times displays photography amazingly well. We have a very strong photo staff and a very strong, group of editors and producers that all work so hard to make the photographers look like we're geniuses, right?
Well, I mean,
and
it's because you are, but
well, I mean, like we're just the button pushers, right? Like we take our pictures, we send them away, and then it takes a whole cast of people to put together this newspaper every single day, and it comes out, and you're like, wow, they just made me look really, really good. And like that's great, but holy crap, like that's it's an amazing process every day, and there's so many people behind the scenes like working to make us look really good, and it's
so
just
cool.
It's very fulfilling.
I love that so much. Okay.
And I also love hearing, sorry, I was just thinking, I love hearing about that teamwork, because a lot of times in the photography industry, especially in like portrait and weddings, it's a very solo job. And did you feel like it was more of a solo job when you were doing, the sports photography you were doing?
Well, so it's interesting. So I started out at the Everett Herald. That was my first staff position. Okay. And we were a small newspaper. We had, I believe, 5 or 6 staff photographers, one photo editor. And because of that, right, we sent one photographer to a football game, one photographer to a soccer game. And it was very solo, right? You're out there alone. You're running yourself. You're doing your own thing. At the Seattle Times, we're a much bigger staff. And so I'm in the distinct, amazingly refreshing opportunity that we have 2 staff photographers at a football game. We send 2 to Huskies, we send 2 to Seahawks. And it's an amazing amount of freedom that we basically divide up the field. And so there's this incredible teamwork in between those 2 photographers when we're shooting games. I'm in constant, communication with Dean. Hey, I'm going to be here. We split up sides of the field, and then basically kind of ad hoc depending on what's going on in the game. So that kind of teamwork is decently new to me because I was never used to having a partner like that.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty unique to the Seattle Times, just because we have a larger staff in order to do that. But then the whole mechanics behind putting out a newspaper every day is just incredible. You have all those people who you'll never see their names in the paper, but they're equally, if not more important than myself, than anybody else. So it's just, newspapers are incredible, the amount of work that goes into them.
I remember going to visit the site of where the Seattle Times used to be printed when I was a kid, and it was just awe-inspiring to see how big the facility was and just how much was going into it. So, and that was only the printing side of things, not even what was going on the back end.
Yeah.
So cool.
Newspapers are really, really, really cool. So
yeah,
totally agree. Okay, I want to talk about gear for a minute. I feel like this is one of the questions that a lot of our audience wants to know. And I imagine, so going into like being a staff photographer, you're not just covering sports, you're also covering other pieces. So well, first of all, what gear do you bring with you? Is it the same every time? Do you swap stuff out depending on what you're shooting? Tell me a little bit about that part of things.
So yes, to the latter, we definitely swap out gear for different things that I'm shooting. So we can talk about what I bring to football specifically. Football, of course, is one of the more high intensity sports that I'll shoot just because of the action on the field. I mean, you know this, Amanda, we move so much up and down the sidelines in the end zone. It's a constant, perpetual motion in football. So for football, I will have 3 cameras. I use Canon R3s if people want to know.
People always want to know. People always want to know the gear.
Yes. So I use Canon R3s. I will have a short body, which will have a wide angle lens. Traditionally, I carry a 24-1.4, which is just a very small fixed focus wide angle lens. And that's just if everybody's coming close to me, right? Like I need something that's short. The other shorter mid-range body, I'll have the same R3 and then a 70-200 standard 2.8 Canon lens. And then on the long body, I will carry a 400 2.8. And then I'll have an extender that if I need to pop it on, I can pop on the extender. So that's the gear that I shoot for football.
And you carry I'm imagining, I've never used a 400. I'm imagining it's giant.
Yes, the 400 2.8 is very large. I mean, we can't see it, right? But it's it's huge. It's the new ones have become very light. But there's yes, and it's incredible. The difference in the weight of the lenses, especially, has gone way down. And actually, the cameras are much lighter now too, because they're mirrorless. Yeah. So like you've eliminated the mirror box contraption, and so it's all a much lighter gear now. But it's still quite heavy. But yes, so the 400 2.8 goes on a monopod, just because. You can handhold it. It is that light now, but like a football game, you're out there for 5 hours,
you're
right?
Not going to want to handhold that.
I'm like, oh, my back. That's all I was thinking. My back.
It's oh my back and oh my knees and oh my legs. It's like we had 2 football games this weekend. We had Huskies on Saturday and Seahawks on Sunday. And yesterday I was like, I'm so sore.
I feel like it's a sport in and of itself. I mean, really, it is, oh man, physical, mental, it really is. Okay. So that's what you would do, like maybe for a sport shoot, but let's say you're just going to do like an editorial piece. I'm thinking specifically of that one picture that you did with that person and their dog with like the ocean right there. And everybody was like, was that photoshopped? Because it looked like the person was like standing on the top of water.
Yes. So that was interesting too. Well, so I actually used a long lens for that photo as well. That lens, I think, was specifically a 200 to 400. And then, so that's the 200 to 400 f4 is another standard lens that I use a lot for baseball and a lot for soccer, just because it has a great focal distance and you have that flexibility in a zoom. So that one that you're specifically
I know we're gonna
talking
have
about,
to. I'll
Amanda.
post a picture of it. We'll include it because it definitely. Everybody was like, "Is that real? That's got to be AI," and you were like, "No, it's not."
Yeah, somebody actually emailed one of my editors and was
seriously?
like, "Listen, they're like, listen, this photo has set off everybody. You know, she's like, I've sent this photo to everybody I know, and they all say that it's AI." And I was like, "Oh crap."
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, so and that one was I put the new cameras have a flip display, so you can like rotate the screen, right? And like I think that's been the case for a lot of like the prosumer cameras in the past. But the R3, the Canon R3 is one of the very first pro bodies that have that little ability to twist the back of the screen, and so that makes putting a camera directly on the ground a little easier to do, right? Because like you don't have to like lay on the ground with it anymore. And so we were searching for a photo. We call them lines only photos. It's a photo that doesn't necessarily have a story associated with it. It's like the editors are like, you have free time, get out there and shoot a photo. And you're like, what do you do? And so I just ended up going to the dog park and finding that photo. And it was, the waves are coming in, right? And like this guy was standing on this little spit of land. And because the camera is so low to the ground, it makes it seem like he's walking on water. So
it's really cool.
So that was another long glass situation. But so yesterday I did 2 food shoots, which is not sports. So I wasn't carrying any sort of long glass. And so I was shooting the R3s again, because those are the bodies that I have. And then a 24 to 70 2.8, and then the 51.4, which is like one of my newest lenses. And it's amazing. If you don't have a 51.4 and you're a portrait photographer,
that's my go-to. Guys know. I feel like I use that 90% of the time. I love it. It's beautiful.
And I would always tell people when I do photography classes, if they're like starting out and they don't have money, I mean, just even the 51.8, it's like $100. It's such a good starter lens. And then, the 1.4, I think, I'm going off the top of my head, it's like 300, 400, so it's not even that much, if I remember right.
I think the RF is, maybe I have the 51 too. it's the newest RF.
Yeah, I say the RF ones definitely are more pricey.
Yeah, and it's a little more pricey, but like it's amazing.
Yeah, right. And I feel like it is one of the more affordable ones. I mean, even though it's pricey, given the some of the lenses I'm looking at currently, which are in the thousands of dollar range, this one is definitely in the affordable bucket, relatively speaking, when it comes to photography.
Affordable.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know I saw a meme the other day that was like, the average person spends $250 a year on their hobby. And it was like all the photographers that do as the hobby were like, yeah, no, that's blowing that budget.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So you talked about a little bit about what you've photographed there. I want to talk about some of your big events that you photographed. So you photographed the 2010 Winter Olympics and the Super Bowls from 2008 and 2014. So those are huge. What is it like to document these just enormous live events? Like, are you given a shot list? Do you go into it with a specific plan? Like, how do you approach just a huge event like those?
Very carefully, and knowing that you're probably going to be the most tired and the most stressed out that you have ever been in your entire life. And that's just what you have to know going into it. They're huge events. They're going to be stressful on your mind and on your body. The 2010 Winter Olympics, they were the ones in Vancouver. Those games, it was so much fun. One of the most fun and the most challenging things I've ever had to photograph. it was basically 18 days straight of like 16 hour
Oh my
days every
gosh.
day.
Wow.
I ended up getting
Oh
pneumonia
my
about
gosh.
2/3 of the
Oh.
way
Oh,
through,
wow.
but continued to work, right? Because like you're at the Olympics, like
Mhm.
go do your thing, make
Not a
images.
do-over.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
no
No do-over.
do-overs. Yeah. You know, like who is the track guy who just ran the 200 or the 100 and he had COVID, right? Like there's no
Yeah,
do-overs.
exactly.
Like you
You just do it.
just go out. Yeah. So that was interesting. So for that, we didn't really have a shot list. I was the only photographer because that was when I was at the Everett Herald. I was the only photographer at the games,
Oh, wow.
but we had 3 writers.
Okay.
So kind of every day it was a little bit of a balance to see which writer was doing what thing, and then to kind of prioritize where we needed me, because if they're all writing 3 different things, right, I can't be 3
Exactly.
places
Yeah.
at once.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and it was an interesting logistical hurdle because I was based out of one of the furthest away hotels that there were. I was way out in Richmond,
Oh,
which
wow. Yeah.
so if you know Vancouver, right, Richmond is to the south,
Yep.
and then you get to Vancouver, and then 2.5 hours later you can be in Whistler.
Mhm.
So Whistler is where they had all the alpine events, the skiing, the snowboarding, the luge, bobsled, all that kind of stuff, cross country skiing, and then they had the snowboard half pipe events up at Cypress, which is just north of Vancouver, and then they had the hockey and the speed skating and all that stuff down in either downtown Vancouver or in Richmond. So, and the way that the media shuttles worked is that if I wanted to go from my hotel in Richmond to make an event up, say at the downhill course in Whistler, then it was going to be about 5 hours for me to go from one place
Oh
to the
my
other.
gosh.
Yes.
That's,
So
yeah.
Jeez.
it's intense, right?
Yeah.
So one of my favorite photos from the Olympics is when Lindsey Vonn won the gold in the women's downhill.
Mhm.
That was kind of one of the premier events of those games. And so it was like, okay, we know that this is something that we want to photograph. So it's like, okay, how am I going to get there?
Mhm.
And it ended up being that the writer and I arranged for a special shuttle that would pick us up from our hotel. I think it was like at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the
Oh my
morning.
gosh.
And we would take that special shuttle into the main media center, which was in downtown Vancouver, right on the waterfront. And then we would pick up the very first media shuttle that went from the media center up to the downhill course at Whistler. And so I made sure that we had that special shuttle that would get us to the very first media shuttle that would put us on the mountain very first thing. So, and it went off really easily. Like we got our shuttle, got the next shuttle, ended up in Whistler. And of course it was still dark.
Yeah.
And so I knew that the way that the finish was laid out at the bottom of the downhill, so they stack media on risers, and that's because like that's just the easiest way to fill
Yeah.
people in. And I'm very short. I'm 5'2". I am not a large person, and so I knew from experience that I was going to have to position myself carefully on those risers to not be blocked by one, anybody standing below me, and two, none of the barriers that were surrounding the base of the downhill, right? Because those skiers come in at like 60, 70 miles an hour, and then they stop and they give them like 50 feet to stop.
Oh, wow.
And if you've ever seen the bottom of the downhill, like some of those women and some of those men can't stop, right? Their legs
Yeah.
are done and they just like plow into the barriers. And that's why they have them, right? So they don't just go like flying into the crowd or like onto the freeway or whatever. And so I got there that early just to make sure that I would have that ability to position myself where, as a short photographer, I could see over the barriers and like not have anyone in front of me. So I I don't even know what time it was, but it was, like I said, it was early and it was dark and it was cold, right? Because it's the snow.
Yeah.
And so I stood out there for 4 hours before it started, 5 hours before it started.
Wow.
So it's just, like, and this is the mid part of the games. And
Yeah.
Is that,
So I will say, I'm always like, oh, wedding photography is like the hardest photography job. And it's not. After talking to you. Oh my gosh. Man. So you like must really love it. And did you grow up with like a love of sports, or was this something like, oh, you just had a chance to photograph sports and you just kind of jumped into it?
Yeah, I've always been into sports. My grandfather, the same grandfather who gave me the camera when I was really young, was also always into sports.
Okay.
And my dad was like, sports, no sports for me, right? Which is unusual because I'm
Yeah.
so into it. But it was my grandfather, and he was Japanese, and so he still had friends in Japan at the time, and so they would send him tapes of sumo wrestling. So we would, whenever we were in Minnesota visiting, because we would go every summer,
Yeah.
Grandpa and I we'd either be watching Twins games or we'd be watching, videotapes of sumo
oh
wrestling
my
that
gosh,
his
that's
friends
so
had sent
awesome.
him.
I love that.
So
Amazing.
yeah, so it was just that was how I got into it. I always thought it was really cool, and
Yeah.
just
Well,
kind
and
of
you're an
loved
avid
it ever since.
skier. You ski everywhere. Like that is
Yeah,
your off
we
season is skiing. Although not sure you really have an off season anymore now that you're on the Times, but
yeah, there's not a lot of off season anymore, but yeah, my husband and I do a lot of skiing, probably too much skiing, but yes, we do a lot of skiing. And then I always played sports when I was a kid too. So,
Yeah.
soccer was a year round thing for me. Played it in high school, played it in select ball. So I've grown up doing that. So I guess that's just what I do. Wanted to stay in sports without wrecking my knees anymore.
Well, I love chatting with you, and I love to find out that you would visit Minnesota because my husband's a teacher in North Minneapolis, and they have a brand new career tech center. He teaches audio, but they also have a photography class. So they're teaching kids photography like as a career. And and I've gotten to meet the photography teacher. He's awesome. He does sports, and most of the kids, they're like, that's what they want to do, is be sports photographers. And we've chatted because I kind of help when they're coming up with their curriculum, kind of keep an insider voice of what's happening in the industry. Much of this information you're sharing with us is really good, but a lot of what they end up doing is photographing the sports teams at their schools. And, they're like, oh, I want to end up photographing for the Titans, or I guess, wait, that's Tennessee. Vikings.
Vikings.
I was just thinking about the Titans. That's why. Vikings.
or the Wild.
Sorry.
I don't know. We got any hockey fans out there? The Wild are there.
I don't know. Maybe they'd be fine with the Titans. And then I'm thinking too, so I guess I have kind of two questions that have popped in my head for those kids. Like, these are 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds. They're like, hey, they're taking these classes because they're serious. They do want to do photography as a career. Where would you say they start?
Well, you start where you are.
Hmm.
If they're 18 and you're in high school, you start photographing your high school teams. That's what I did.
Okay.
Yes, everybody wants to photograph NFL. Yes, everyone wants to photograph, professional hockey. The honest truth of it is that not very many people will.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't go directly into it. You have to practice.
Mm-hmm.
This is just like any other thing, right? You don't get good at something because you just sit around and hope that it'll happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're all in the position that we're in because we've honed our craft. We've practiced so much to get where we are. And where 18-year-olds, where 17-year-olds are, is they're in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You need to photograph where you are. You need to start going to your Friday night football games. You need to start photographing your girls' volleyball team. You need to shoot soccer. You need to do all these things in order to gain the skills to get higher, to go to be where you want to be. And the best way to do that is to photograph your friends.
Mm-hmm.
If your friend has an ultimate frisbee team that they play on, go to the park on Saturday and photograph your friend's ultimate frisbee game. Like this is just what you do to get better, to get to a level that someone will be like, yeah, sure, maybe come photograph a Major League Soccer game for us. But you're not going to get there if you haven't practiced your craft.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love the other thing I was going to mention is when I was looking at your website, because you have done all this, you've done the Olympics, you've done the Super Bowl, but you also have a section with your high school sports. And some of those images were just so moving, like those moments that are so important. And you see that same like pride and joy of the kids like winning or overcoming something. And I just was like, you know what? These high school games maybe aren't as like well known or popular, but they're just as important to these kids. And I love that they have these images to look back on. And it's not just a posed, here I am in my outfit, but it's like real moments. And I just thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. And the thing that I love about sports photography is that the human element of it, the emotion of it. And when you get to the highest levels, when you get to the NFL, when you get to the NBA, those guys and gals are like, hey, like this is not our first rodeo. Like we've won before and we've lost before. So they're not at their peak of emotion. Where you find the peak of emotion, where you find incredible photos, is at the younger levels. Like my best emotional photos are from high school and prep sports. Like if you're winning a championship as a 17-year-old and that is your first championship, you are the happiest person that I have ever seen. Or conversely, if you've lost that game, you are the saddest. And so and that kind of emotion sometimes doesn't happen at the bigger levels, at the professional levels, at the collegiate level. Where that emotion happens is in high school sports. And that's what's incredible about high school sports is, one, you have a lot better access, right? Like sometimes those kids are your friends, right? So they're fine with you sticking cameras in their faces and being next to them. And they're gonna have those emotions that as a photographer, right? Like we want that true emotion. We want that sadness. We want that, that overjoyness. That's not a word, but we as a photographer, that's what you want to see, right? You want to see that. So
and you see it in your photos, like you really do.
What's been your favorite assignment to date?
I was thinking about that this morning, and I almost love everything I do every day. Okay, I don't like going out and shooting a picture of a building, right? That's just boring. But so that's not my favorite. But I think so. As a newspaper photographer, right, we get tons of different assignments every day. So I don't always shoot sports. I shoot sports 80% of the time. In the fall, it's like 90 to 95%, right? Because we have football going. But one of the most fun things and very challenging assignments that I had was that Boeing let us into the wide body factory in Everett to photograph them making the very last 747. So the 747, right, is our iconic jetliner, right? It's the 4-engine. It has the big bulbous head on it. It, if you type in, airplane in your phone, the emoji that pops up is a 747. Like that's the plane. And the very last one was made about a year and a half ago. And that's the very last one that will ever be made. They've shut down the line. And so that's kind of iconic, right? Because this is the plane no longer being made. And so Boeing gave us this pretty incredible opportunity to be in the factory at kind of key moments of the assembly of this plane. So I was there, maybe 6 or 7 times over the course of them making the aircraft. There's several key spots when you build an aircraft. One of them is when you join the fuselage pieces, right? Because like an airplane, you just don't all make at once. Well, an aircraft as large as 747, you just don't like make it. So it comes in sections. And so one of the main things is called or now I can't even remember the name, but it's the body join. It's where they bring, the front pieces, the middle pieces, and the back pieces all together. And it takes course over about a 7-hour shift. And they do it overnight because it involves these giant overhead cranes that basically bring the pieces of the aircraft together and then lower them down. And you do it at night because you don't want people walking under these giant pieces of airplane, right? And so that was one of the moments that we were there. We were there when they put the tail on, and then when they mounted the engines to the wings. So we were there kind of at all these different moments, and it was really, really amazing to watch people build this massive, massive aircraft. So that's not really sports photography at all, but it was really one of the more cool things. And, who can say they've been in the Boeing wide body facility at 3:00 in the morning,
Well, and that's why.
And do you have those photos posted somewhere?
They are not. Well, they're on the Seattle Times' website.
Yeah. So I saw them. That's where I saw them, was on the website.
Well, even, I love hearing it too, because my son is, one of his best friends is very into planes, which has gotten him into planes. So he loves, like, my son will always point out the 747s. And I don't think I knew that they had stopped building. So how cool. I'll have to show him that and look for myself, of course.
Yeah. I'll get you the link because they displayed it online very, very well.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, like a very story narrative thing, really big photos. So it looks real nice.
It looks amazing. I definitely remember looking through that one. But yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you what your favorite assignment was. Not what was your favorite sports assignment, but what was your favorite assignment? Because knowing that you have had so many different things that you have photographed, and, I feel like everybody gets excited about sports, but that's, not always where the most heartfelt things come to, the things that maybe make you the most excited. Yeah. So that's why I definitely wanted to just phrase it that way, and not what was your favorite sports moment? What was your favorite assignment? I love that. And like you said, how cool to have access to something like that. What an amazing moment. How many other photographers were there during the process?
So it was myself, and then at any other given time, one other photographer from the New York Times.
Oh, wow.
And that was it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty darn exclusive.
Yeah, no kidding.
And kind of another one of those things where you keep on pinching yourself and you're like, guys, like, I'm here. Like, this is amazing.
That's
like,
so cool.
I don't know how I'm here, but I'm here, and I'm having a really great time.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I love about having this as a career, is there, I think, are so many pinch me moments where you're like, wow, how amazing. And I just need to stop for a second to recognize that this is such a unique opportunity that I wouldn't have had I gone into something different. Had you become a doctor, it would have been, amazing, and you would have been fabulous, but definitely would not have seen that moment happen as a doctor.
Right. Yes. 100% agree. I think the experiences that a newspaper photographer has makes up for the fact that I will never get rich and, retire early from it. There's a trade-off, right?
Exactly.
And this is it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, part of it too, I'm like, why would you want to retire early from something that's so amazing and fulfills you so much? Yeah. So there you go.
Exactly.
Okay. So I want to talk about photojournalism, sports photography. Definitely it's seen as more of a male dominated field. So as a woman with a successful career in the space, what has your experience been navigating that environment? Have you faced any challenges or opportunities as a result of that?
So it used to be that when I would walk into a media room at a sporting event, I was either the only woman or one of two women in a room of 60, 70 men. Mm. and that's just how it was. And like I said, I don't know how I got there, but I was there. So, and it was myself, and it was Elaine Thompson from the Associated Press, who really was one of kind of the original trailblazers as far as women in sports photography. Shout out to Elaine, because she's amazing. She's retired now, but and it was, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was challenging. I just, because that's how I started, that's just how it was for me. It didn't seem like it was unusual that this thing needed to change. But now, of course, like, yes, like the fact that I was either one, the only female photographer in the room, or one of two, like, that's awful. That's just awful. Women make up how much percent of the world's people? 51%, 52%. And I was the only female in the room. Like, that needs to change. That's just a fact of what it is. But back then it was just like, well, this is just how it is. And now it's gotten better. I've been in this game long enough now that, like, things have begun to shift, and you can see that. And especially in the Seattle area, those things have shifted. Our current AP staffer is a female. Our current Getty staffer here in the city is also a female. Like, that's a huge shift. Like, we're beginning to see this come around. But I travel a lot. I was just in Boston 2 weeks ago for the Seahawks Patriots game. There were 2 women photographers in that media room. So it hasn't started to shift everywhere. It just kind of depends on where you are. Obviously, a lot of the cities on the coast in California have a lot more women photographers. In the Midwest, in the Central, like, you're not seeing as many. And I am not in a position to be like, why is that? Like, what's happening here? But I think that does need to change. You need different people looking at the same thing in a different way. So, and that starts with having minorities shoot sports. That starts with women shooting sports. That starts with not having a white male skew on everything that you see on a sports field.
Cool.
So,
yeah, I knew that you'd been in it for so long, so I figured that you've seen what has happened. So yeah, it's really interesting to get your perspective on that. And I totally agree that in Seattle, I feel like it's a unique experience. There are a lot of women photographers that are involved. I'm thinking of, a handful right now that, I met through the Seahawks that were all women. And what I always liked is I felt like they were all so welcoming, having me come into a space where I was not familiar. When I was shooting for the Seahawks, I actually wasn't shooting sports. I was shooting kids for this program. And I think that some of I know I had some experiences with some male photographers that were like, well, what are you even doing here? And I never got that from the women photographers. They were all like, oh, here, let me help you out with this. And, I'm going to shout out Rod Marr again too, because he has always been so welcoming. And he was always like finding a spot for me. He was finding a place where I could be, and was just like, what are you shooting today? Oh, awesome. Chris Mast, another male who was always really supportive. But I definitely found a lot of support and acceptance from the female photographers. So that was always really nice to come into that, and to know when I went into the media room, I was going to have some support for something that I was very new at to begin with.
Yeah. And I think women are more welcoming to women too. And I think, as tradition has found, like, if you start in a room with 60 men and 1 woman, and there's slowly less and less men, those men are going to be like, like,
yep.
Yep. Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because I come from the wedding photography world. I started like 19 years ago. And when I first started, it was right on the cusp when it was mostly male dominated. And so, of course, it's changed so much. I know a lot faster than what it is in sports photography. So now there's probably more. It is interesting, just even for photography in general, for all different types. It is necessary to have more women, because we've even chatted about, just with portraits, just how women, even take portraits differently.
Yeah.
And it's something you can see and you can experience. And that having just a diverse way of seeing the world and everything around us, it helps all of us to be able to look at things a little differently. So
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so we've been talking about your expansive career, Jenny, and all the stuff that you've done. So looking back, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in your career?
I'm not sure I would have done anything differently. I appreciate my trajectory for what it is. I started where I should have started, which is on a lower regional newspaper, a local newspaper, really. And I have gained so many experiences along the way. And I think all of those experiences put together in the order in which they were have led me to where I am today. So I wouldn't change anything at all.
Yeah. You are the first person, I think, who has said that we've interviewed, which is fabulous. I was going to say, I'm like, but that's the thing is, I think it's fabulous because I do feel like so much of the time we do get answers for this, ranging from a bunch of different things. So to have you say, you know what? No, like I am where I am because of that, I think is just fabulous. That's fantastic.
Either that or just like so blindly optimistic. It's sickening or something.
Which we need more of that. We really do.
We do need more optimism. So I love that so much.
Yeah.
Just come to me with all your optimism. I will make your day sunny.
Perfect. I love it. Especially today on this very cloudy, gray day, at least where I'm at in Kirkland.
It's breaking up right now. So you might be getting sun soon.
Maybe Jenny, you're the one sending it my way.
On your way.
That's the thing. Jenny is sending it my way. Oh, this has been so awesome. Jenny, can you tell our audience where to find some of your amazing work online?
Well, first and foremost, I would go to seattletimes.com. That is my employer. That is where you will see the majority of my work. And of course, you will see lots of other things there. It is a fantastic newspaper. And the other place, I'm on Instagram, Jennifer Buchanan Photo. A lot of stuff on there is like what I'm cooking or, what the garden currently looks like. So you'll have to excuse me if you don't see
your garden's amazing.
all photos all the time. So, but yeah, that's also a good place because I tend to take a lot of really weird, bonkers pictures.
You do, and they're amazing. Oh my gosh. Jenny shares them in her stories and they are just somehow you manage when you're, photograph. I'm just thinking of like some of the baseball pictures that you've photographed where it's just these, like, you are in the right place at the wrong time. Like where it's just these images where you're like, how did she get that? That's so weird.
Yes.
But in like the best way possible.
I'm intrigued.
The master of weird photos. So if your thing, right? If you're what do the kids say? My vice or
I don't even know. It's terrible. I'm like awful. You're the one, Whitney, that has a tween, so I feel like you should know this thing.
I am like banned from ever using any of those words, which makes me want to use them more,
But if your thing is like super weird sports photos that you won't ever see published anywhere, like come check out my stories.
Jenny's your person.
I'm it. That's what I do. I shoot really bizarre stuff where you're like, what even is that?
And what I also love is that you do share those. I feel like so many photographers really only share like, here's the perfect thing that I ended up getting. And I love that you're like, here's the weird stuff I got and it's awesome.
Yeah. It could be a book. That could be how you retire.
Oh, yes, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Whitney's got your retirement plan. Who needs that 401k?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this has been so awesome, Jenny. Thank you again for coming on. I so appreciate it. And thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been so awesome. It's been fun to get to interview photographers that I know on a personal level and get to actually know more about them along the way too, because I feel like, when we see each other, we're usually working. And so, there's not a lot of time to delve into all these big questions. So it's been really fun getting to know even more about you. So yay. So audience, thank you so much for listening in. We so appreciate you being here for season 2 and checking out all of our new episodes. So come to us again in the next 2 weeks, because every other week we're now posting our new podcast episode. So we will see you in 2 weeks for a new one. Thanks again.
Bye.
Hey.
Okay, Photo BFFs, if you have not subscribed, do that right now so you never miss a new episode. You can also find us at theeditweekly.com, where we have free resources and downloads for you to help grow your photo business.